Dear Heavenly Father, we'd like to open today in your name. We thank you for all the wonderful things that you do for us, all the grace that you show us, obviously when we don't deserve it. We thank you for all the warriors in this world willing to fight for what is right and just. Help us to always support that cause and do your will wherever and whenever we can. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So welcome everybody today to our special saddle event. We've been offline here for a little bit during the summer, but thank you so much for hosting us today. We have a very special guest, does a lot of work in the Patriot community, trying to get our nation back on track, trying to expose the deep state and the infiltration of all our good systems that we set up in this country, our republic, from the Declaration of Independence to our Constitution, to our state constitutions, all the way down. We've tried to set up a government of the people, by the people, for the people, under God, right? One nation under God. I talked about this last night at our Republican Party event, and we need to do all we can to get God back into the conversation.
Amen.
We've kind of have this, I believe, this hollow conservatism right now where we try to advocate for conservative views and policies without invoking God. And it doesn't work. The only claim we have to freedom and liberty is a government that's subject to Almighty God. When the government is not subject to God, the government becomes God. And it will determine what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, who lives and dies. And we've seen that play out in this nation right now where we have a government that allows for the murder of babies until the moment of birth and sometimes after. The mutilation of young children, genital mutilation that they can never come back from. Sex trafficking and child trafficking across our southern border. This is where we come to as a nation. Our government is facilitating and allowing and even encouraging these activities with our tax dollars. And I believe this is all a result of taking God out of the conversation, and we've allowed that over the past few generations. I think for most of the history of this nation, we honored God and kept God in the conversation. And luckily, or by God's grace, we still have these ideas and concepts in our official governing documents. So God's name is in our official governing documents right now. The state of Wisconsin, I didn't know this until a couple years ago after COVID hit and started looking into all this stuff, but I probably mentioned it before, but in the Wisconsin Constitution, the preamble, the first thing it says is, "We, the people of Wisconsin, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom in order to secure its blessings, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare, do establish this Constitution." So they knew that. We all know it. It's in our history. It's in our documents. So we still have claim to those documents. So we need to do that. We need to voice that. We need to remind our elected representatives of that. And the only path back to a righteous nation with righteous laws is to invoke the name of God in everything that we do, including our public policy. So let's remember that, advocate for it, don't be shy about doing it and saying it in public and reminding everybody this is our heritage. This is who we are as a people, as a nation, and as the chairman of the Republican Party right now, it is the heritage of the Republican Party as well, and it's in all of our, from the RNC to the Republican Party of Wisconsin to our own county chapter. God's name is in all of our official governing platforms. So we have the authority to remind each other that that's what we're doing here. So with that, I want to introduce the deep state marauder, Raiklin. He's in the fight.
Good evening. So, I always ask with this, who has never heard of the deep state marauder? Oh, wow, more people have heard it. Good, good. So, mic's good, volume's up, everybody can hear me? Yeah. All right, so I'm happy to be here. I wasn't expecting to do an event today, but luckily I got invited for the second event. Thank you, Mr. Rust and company. I had a chance to stay at their lovely home. Very excellent hospitality, something you normally do not see in the DC swamp. So definitely love being out here. So I want to take the next, depending on how much time you guys allow me and how much interest you maintain in this conversation, maybe 20 to 30 minutes max. I want to lay out first off, the core principle, moral, legal, and ethical reasons of why I'm in this fight. And it comes and stems from 4 passages in the Bible, okay? And as you look through it, you may have your different perspectives and take on it, but just kind of follow along in the ride with me, where we're trying to move the phrase, in God we trust. I would like to get to a point where we can apply that to our government, because right now, I personally have absolutely zero trust in our current illegitimate and lawless executive branch at the federal level. Is everybody? Now, we do have certain pockets of our institutions at the federal level that I do have a little bit of trust in. And luckily, they're starting to listen to us more and more because we have platforms such as uncensored ability to communicate. Because a lot of us that are sitting here were probably the early ones that said, you know what? Yeah, the lockdown thing, that doesn't apply to this family, right? And this family. You can't censor us in person, but they try to censor us digitally. Luckily, those institutions that I'm referring to, we currently have this massive battle going on between those that represent those that we should not and will not trust, that are in positions of power in our federal Congress, versus those that are backed by those that we trust each other and support those that we trust. And I'm talking about, no? Is it this one? Okay, perfect.
Walk around.
Because I wasn't sure what was going on. Freedom! More freedom! This is what we want, right? So, with that, let me just kind of pause real quick. Let's take a look at the 4 passages and how we basically claw back the one institution at a minimum at the federal level to start to bring back our freedoms and then inoculate the rest of our federal government and the other institutions and levers of power to be able to bring back that trust so that our government is representative of what we just said in my introduction here, is that we need to regain the trust so that we can operate as a society freely, fairly, securely, and flourish, and not essentially put foot on neck of every one of us and then not allow this lawless government to murder our children, to mutilate our children, not only physically, but mentally, and get back to a state of normalcy. So let's take a look, please take a look at the screen.
And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Also, I have the voice of the Lord saying, who shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me. This thing will be to favor, whatever you have done in the doing of it. Practice for practice, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever increase you have given to him, shall be given to him. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck, and he was cast into the sea, than that he should cause complete ruin to sin.
So those four passages, this is how I want to apply them to what our current reality is in order to be able to bring our country back. Number one, truth. The last 3 years at a minimum, probably going back all the way to 2018, we had a lawless, illegitimate leadership at the FBI, as I like to pronounce it, that forced, coerced, manipulated the entire national discussion, whether it be big media or big tech, through Twitter 1.0, Facebook, CommieTube, Instagarbage, Lincoln Project in to basically tell you what you can read, listen to, and what content and from what people you could actually hear it from. Digital censorship. So then if you're blocking the truth from getting out, the entire nation is manipulated, and you probably don't even know what happens. Well, guess what? Enough of us did know what was going on, and we pushed back. What happened to us? Censored, suspended. Oh, you're labeled as what? The worst person in the history of humanity. And then when they called us that, guess what? I know my truth, and having spent 25 years in the national security apparatus as an intelligence officer at tactical, operational, strategic levels, as a Green Beret commander at the detachment company level, countering ISIS, Taliban, MS-13, Russian aggression across 5 continents, picking up a law degree, focusing on constitutional law, I'm not going to let them bully me. If they attempt to bully me, guess what? I got a massive boomerang coming their way. And I'm talking about Christopher Wray up there over at the FBI. I'm talking about Mayorkas over at the DHS. I'm talking about the fake Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Is anything that I say illegal just now? What do they do when I say that? And then I start to bring receipts with the truth. And I write Substack articles laying out every single one of these thugs and their corrupt criminal transgressions on our constitutional rights. First Amendment. I escalate. I create sounds that are truthful, they don't like. Fourth Amendment, what do? We travel the country and they start to follow along and censor, not only censor us, but follow along what we're doing based on all these different things on social media, right? Then they place you on different lists. Any due process there? Did they ask anybody if they should or shouldn't do it? Is there any sort of due process? No, they don't do that. So then as they do these actions, we call them out. And even though they censored us, what was created over the last couple of years? If you don't know these platforms, I plead with you to take out your phones, take notes, take your notebooks out, and start to possibly install these apps. Because they're the apps that don't censor. Telegram. Anybody heard of these?
Yes.
Nice. Truth Social. Anybody heard of that?
Yes.
How about Getter? Who has not heard of that? GETTR. What about Rumble? It's the non-commie tube, okay? You look at the terms of service of commie tube. You put out content that the regime doesn't like, and it says, hey, you violated Chinese Communist Party's rules, terms of service for us to exist. Boop, delete you. I don't know where your loyalties lie. I kind of do. But some of these folks, their loyalties lie with the Chinese Communist Party. That's a problem for me, right? And I'm sure that's a problem for all of us. So then why support great content on Facebook, CommieTube, InstaGarbage, all these, right? When we can do it exclusively, uniquely, on platforms that allow First Amendment and free speech to flourish so that we can get to the truth to expose the scum. That's where we're at, right? So over the last couple of years, we've been able to get the truth out. That's phase one. The truth will set you free, but we have to get it out. Telegram, Rumble, right? Although Substack allows me to publish without too much censorship. But the payment processor, I'm sure the FDI is saying, hey, once somebody gets too many subscribers, go ahead and make the payment processor malfunction, right? Another censorship scheme. So it's a cat and mouse game. So number two. What was the second passage? Anybody remember?
Isaiah.
Who shall I send? Not me. We need all of us, right? We need to look in the mirror and say, you know what? So-and-so government official, politician, name it, needs to do the following. Well, guess what? They didn't. They still aren't. So then what are we left with? I look to my left. No one's exposing these corrupt, criminal, I won't use expletives, I'm in church. No, and no one's doing it on this side of me. But I do see a mirror. So if no one's putting out the truth, and you know, like a lot of people haven't had the experience that I've been blessed with, and the background, knowledge, experience, etc. But I go across the country, everyone knows deep down inside something is wrong, and it seems very curated, manipulated, right?
Yes.
So we need to let people know that and question it, ask questions. And if you're being censored and somebody's trying to shut you down, as Tucker said a few weeks ago, I think in one of his interviews, and it makes good sense. When was the last time somebody stopped you from saying something that was false, clearly false? Do you get punished for saying something that's really incorrect? Not really. But if it's really truthful and it hurts people in high-level positions, that's when, in the course of humanity's history, you're going to get censored. So when that happens, guess what? We're over the target. Now it's time to lay down suppressive fire peacefully and patriotically and colloquially. What about number 3? Leviticus? Now, I'm not the one to decide, we're supposed to forgive and forget. I don't know about forget. But I think we as a society, as a collective, as a community, need to have a certain set of rules that are moral, legal, just, ethical, based on our foundational principles, which tie it back to all of our foundational documents, as mentioned earlier. Tie it back to the Bible, right? And so why not create a mechanism, a government that we can trust to actually dispel consequences appropriate with the immoral, unethical behaviors of citizens as well as governmental actors within our institutions, but still trying to use the institutions that are still moral, legal, and ethical to do so. And that's kind of where I mentioned. One of our branches of government right now, completely illegitimate, completely lawless. And that's how we need to treat them. But we can't be vigilantes about it. We still have our personal, legal, moral, and ethical obligations to the community and to the system so that we can course correct. So we focus our attention on building our institutions that are still barely functioning, increase their capability so that we can reject the lawlessness. Eye for an eye, right? Last one. This is how I interpret it. Are there any children in here? Who has children? So what happens if one of these lawless and illegitimate belligerents in the executive branch, whether it's at the federal level, at the state level here in Wisconsin, county level, comes after your children, mutilates them, murders them? What are you gonna do? I can't hear anybody. What are you gonna do? Is that a red line?
Yes.
Is that a red line?
Yes.
100%.
It is for me. So, to make things a little bit more positive amidst that note, I want you to listen closely to the lyrics of this song. And before I play it, who has been censored on social media? Probably over half of this room. Listen closely and tell me if this resonates with you. What does that say up there? Somebody stand up and read that, please, for me, loudly.
Do not accept the results of the 11/3/20 elections until the state legislatures of Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Nevada conduct a roll call vote for presidential office. Correct? And there are Article 154, Article 2, Section 1, and U.S. Constitution violators.
So, that was, I think, the last tweet that I put out on my Twitter on January 7th or 8th, 7th of 2021. They suspended me for that. Up to that point, I had in December of 2020, I had 200 million impressions on Twitter for stuff that I was putting out. I was nobody. But then all of a sudden, a president retweets me once, twice, 3 times, I think at least, and other prominent individuals. So then now I'm at a point where I think I had more impressions on this platform than I pronounce it. MSDNC, Commie News Network, New York Slimes, Washington Compost. In the collective, what does the FBI do? They contact their buddy who was the former general counsel at FBI and say, hey, Jim Baker, it's Brian Arden. Chris Ray wants you to go ahead and nuke Ivan Raiklin's account because it's a little too truthful. And why don't you go ahead and do the same thing with the president, General Flynn, and thousands of others. Who was nuked on January 8th in this room of 2021? I see at least one here. Is that violent rhetoric? Anybody? I can't, yes, no?
No.
Is that inciting any violence?
No.
Is that pretty peaceful and patriotic? I'm referring to constitutional provisions. When you look up the constitutional provisions and you see that the legislative bodies of states that are listed there, as well as all other states, have the authority on the allocation of their presidential electors, and you know that the COVID directives by the governors, the lawless, illegitimate executive branch actors, said, hey, we're going to run our elections how the governor wants, not how the legislature has the authority to do. That's a problem. I called it out, and I have not stopped calling it out. So, who here thinks that the 2020 election was the most safe and secure endeavor ever in the history of humanity? Most pristine thing that any mammal on this earth has ever conducted was the 2020 election, right?
No.
Any election fraud deniers in here? I think y'all are election deniers is what they call y'all, right? I'm talking about those that are election fraud deniers. So let's go through history. Have there ever been crimes committed in America since its inception? Just one? At least? Okay, let's narrow it down. Have there ever been murders conducted in America? Okay, cool. Have there ever been robberies conducted? Theft, larceny? But never, there has never been election fraud. Ever. But guess what? If you said that, you're good. You can post online. But if you said something else with evidence to support it, gone. And so I'm not going to go into the details of how that occurred. I think everybody realizes that did happen. But what many people don't realize is that which individuals and organizations were able to cover for what happened. Many people say, oh, you know, the FBI, we've exposed that in Congress. Hey, the DHS, they did, you know, they intimidated folks, right? The DOD did the coercive illegal mandates to make sure that their national security apparatus was completely destroyed because 60 to 80,000 of us left the DOD, retired last year myself, because we weren't going to bend the knee 1 inch, 1 millimeter. Because we weren't going to be involved in the mutilation promotion. We weren't going to be involved in consumption and the advocacy of unsafe and ineffective emergency use authorized products, to include the face toilets, some people pronounce it. Or for kids, it's pronounced child neglect, child abuse, and lung asphyxiation devices. Or they wanted to sell you on, be careful, I don't want to use too aggressive language here in church.
You can do it.
What is it called when somebody conducts an unwanted penetration of the body? What do you call it when it's medical? where they basically say, we must inject unwanted into your nose to supposedly test you. Medical. That's what they did. The lawless and illegitimate executive branch forced it on society. And if you went against it, the lawless and illegitimate executive branch censored you, put you on a list, right? Who's radical here? Totally radical, these guys. And number 3, who needed to make money hand over fist? Who knows somebody that took the jab that didn't want it? Who knows at least one other person that basically reluctantly took the jab because they were in a position where they couldn't risk losing their job. And had they not been in that position, there's no way they would have taken it. Is that probably everybody in this room? Same institutions forced it. So, one institution that many people don't know was involved in the coup, I call it, the cover-up, is right here on the board. The Capitol Police Board. Who has ever heard of that? I'll be very surprised if anybody has. This is the insider baseball that the deep state marauder likes to go into. Voting members of the Capitol Police Board. Who appoints those voting members? And guess who controls who gets arrested, who doesn't get arrested, and how much to arrest them, and how much to politically persecute them. Meaning, everybody in the Washington, D.C. area that was in the vicinity of the Capitol, whether it was inside on January 6th, outside in the restricted zone, or not even in the restricted zone in the vicinity of the Capitol, or even in the Washington, D.C. district, if you were a political opponent of the host of the joint session that day by the name of Nancy Pelosi, and they check your social media feed, and it says that you support the Constitution, and you're against all the lawless, illegitimate actions of the federal executive branch that's making money hand over fist because of the pandemic, guess what happens to you? I was in D.C. on January 6th, and I'm proud of it, because I'm an early critical thinker. I was at the Ellipse. What happened to me? What did Pelosi do to me? I have 20 investigations. The J6 cover-up committee. Nothing. The DOD, multiple investigations on me in my reserve capacity back then. Nothing. They stopped me from going on bases. Because she probably directed it. The Department of Justice wanted to find something on me because I'm a little too vocal, like the song says. All because I get a little too vocal, making sounds that they don't like. Perfect. Only cosmetic, only cosmetic. No penetration there. So, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, for 21 months, they had 3 federal air marshals surveilling me from my home to the airport, went through secondary, third screening, Fourth Amendment, invasive assault, if you will. I hate to say assault because assault requires fear or apprehension of harm, so you can't really assault me, okay? So there's never fear or apprehension. So most people would consider it assault. And then those 3 federal air marshals would follow me onto the plane, observe me, of course, while I'm observing them, right? And then to my destination, where I communicated with, I don't know, the president of the Senate of Arizona, to explain to her that we still reject the election. Is my ability to communicate with the president of the Senate violent incitement of anything? Explaining to her her constitutional obligation to reject the electors that were transmitted in 2020. I don't think so. I think most people would agree. And what about those air marshals observing, surveilling, and doing all this on me as I go to speak to the Speaker of the House? In Wisconsin, your beloved Robin Boss. Is that lawful for me to basically go to a meeting and sit from me to you and explain, Mr. Speaker, that tweet that I sent? Here's some details behind it. And after that meeting, he comes out and says, yes, I believe that there was widespread fraud. And if I were a juror on a jury, I would vote to go ahead and convict those that conducted the fraud. And then I would respond with something like, you are a juror. Because the Constitution granted you that power, especially as the Speaker, to go ahead and see, oh yeah, the drop boxes were illegal. Your Supreme Court said that. Now it's your turn to go ahead and just basically rubber stamp that the 10 electors from Wisconsin were illegitimate. And you have the authority to pull it back. Because those are the state's units of sovereignty that you allocate at your will based on political courage and really whim, because the power is yours. And you do it based on the political will of your constituents. But unfortunately, we know what happened. So, 20 investigations later, have I ever been arrested? No. Have I ever been indicted? Have they ever directly confronted me to ask me questions? That's no. I wonder why. Because I got receipts on every single person that investigated me. Because I spent 25 years in the system. I know who was investigating me. And then I start to expose their transgressions. That's how I survive. So let's go back here. Does anybody know someone on January 6th that has been, let's just say, fondled by Nancy Pelosi? Has anybody heard of someone that's been fondled by Nancy Pelosi? How about 1,100 folks? For what? Over 95% of them did this. Hey officer, can I take a selfie with you? Never been to DC before in my life. This is pretty cool. And what about this guy? Capitol's over there. He's chilling out in Baltimore. Texting. That's funny. That guy gets 22 years. Not even in DC. Why? Because he represents the biggest political threat to Nancy Pelosi and her organizations. He was already pre-targeted and pre-listed that they were going to go after him. And the people that he associated with. And who's doing that? This is how it happened. Nancy Pelosi tells her Capitol Police Chief from January 8th to July 23rd, acting at the time, Yogananda Pittman, go ahead and criminalize everybody, especially if they're aligned with certain members of Congress that we need to target. Connect them somehow. Go ahead and pull the CCTV footage that you own, Capitol Police Chief now. Only include evidence that we can make look like it will incriminate further who we're going after. Find the Capitol Police officers that were in the vicinity of that CCTV footage, coerce them into making an impact statement that is going to criminalize the individuals we're going after that were in the vicinity of the Capitol, and if they refuse to, fire them. Take that package, work with the General Counsel of the U.S. Capitol Police, Thomas Tobias, to go ahead and send over that criminal referral package over to the DOJ, who is already predisposed to make sure that those defendants are going to be criminalized to the maximum. So step one, it's already 100% conviction rate because of the manipulation and curation and political persecution. And then it's up to the DOJ to be like, oh, sweet. And then by the time it hits the court to prosecute, what happens? The court has already, the judge sitting on the bench has already been manipulated by everything surrounding him or her, and the J6 cover-up committee flashing lights, and the compliant, complicit, curated, manipulated mainstream media and big tech to convince the judge already before the defendant walks into the room that the person being charged is the worst person in the history of humanity. Never before has the human race experienced this demonic human flesh to enter the courtroom. That's the level of bias that started at the Capitol Police, continued on at the DOJ, and in the courtroom. And by the way, the jury pool in Washington, D.C. is also receiving this manipulated, curated content for them to be predisposed automatically. Why am I sitting through this trial when I am going to convict this individual regardless of what is presented in the courtroom? And oh, by the way, the judge will not allow evidence that will be exculpatory to the defendant to even be presented in the courtroom. How do I know this? I've been to many a trial. Is that fair?
No.
Is that moral?
No.
Is that ethical? Who's calling him out? Is anybody calling him out? I would argue almost no. Because they put fear in everybody. Except for some of us don't care. Boomerang. You want to assault or put fear in me? Guess what? You're going to regret it. And that's when you activated me. So they weaponized me against them for their lawless activity. And luckily, I have enough people here throughout the country that see and observe what I've been uncovering as I publish it on Telegram, Rumble, right? We're all swarming to those locations. And we've built a network nationally enough to basically start calling them out. And that is clearly, that fight that's going on in our country right now is clearly represented in this speaker's fight. Who has heard that there's a current vacancy for the Speaker of the House? That is literally the direct representation of what's going on in our country right now. Because the House of Representatives is a body that represents as closely as possible the people at the federal level. You have just enough members of Congress that are not tied to lobbyists, big dollar donors representing the corporate autocracy I just listed that are backing these guys, right? The Pelosi's and the McConnells and the Schumers. And so luckily now, I think we are on the ascendancy because we don't have lockdowns. We can communicate. We have these social media platforms that we can organize on. So now, we need to take it to the next level to push back against these scum. Wait a second. So, on July 23rd, 2021, when Pelosi was Speaker and Chuck Schumer was the Senate Majority Leader, they appointed their sergeants at arms, who then decide who the Capitol Police Chief is, based on who the chairman of the board of the Capitol Police Chief is, which is a rotating position between the House Sergeant at Arms, which is bottom left there, and the Senate Sergeant at Arms. From today through January 3rd of 2024, Ms. Gibson on the right is the chair of the board of the Capitol Police Board. On January 3rd, that goes to the House. So then, Kevin McCarthy, when he was the failed speaker, appointed the acting House Sergeant at Arms. And right now, while everyone's talking about all this other stuff, controlling who the House Sergeant at Arms, I argue, on January 3rd, is the most important position in our country to take it back. And here's why. The House Sergeant at Arms becomes the chairman of that Capitol Police Board, can then remove the Capitol Police Chief, who who has been providing cover for Pelosi and Schumer for the coup that took place on January 6th and all the criminalization of J6. He owns the CCTV footage. He owns all of the interactions between the non-disclosure agreements and coercion of the Capitol Police, exposing all the internal lawless activity that cannot be FOIA. You cannot penetrate the legislative branch without the approval of the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader. So, who would be in the most vested, strongest interest as Speaker of the House to a point, and who would be in the best position as appointing a House Sergeant at Arms that knows in detail, by name, date, location, transgression of all of the proverbial deep state? Anybody have any ideas? Huh? Why? Why do you think Trump, as Speaker, would be in the strongest position to be able to unravel all of this? Let's think this through. What's that? Self-interest, right? What else?
He was never saying he wasn't president anymore. He still feels he's got the job.
Anyone else?
He knows everything.
He's got guts.
I'll say that louder.
He's got guts.
Does he have a vested interest to basically expose everybody and everything regardless of what happens to him?
Yes, right. Yes.
Now, having said that, he's not a member of Congress. So let's back up a little bit.
You don't have to be.
Who, if it were a member of Congress, of the 221 Republicans that are currently there, who would be the best person to be speaking? That knows who to go after and what questions to ask, and that they conducted and committed transgressions. Of the lawless individuals that I just explained, who's our biggest threat within our executive branch? I argue it's the DOJ and the FBI.
Yeah.
Does anybody disagree? Who's currently the chair of the Judiciary Committee? Who's currently the chair of the Weaponization Committee? Same person. So if it were an individual that's a current member of Congress, I would argue that Congressman Jim Jordan is in the pole position to bring back massive necessary body check against a lawless and illegitimate DOJ and the FBI. Okay? But why are you going to put your number 2 player on the field when you got to take out, politically speaking, I guess, when you have to remove the illegitimacy of an executive branch that is so run amok, and a Senate that is also participating in that lawlessness, supporting that lawless executive branch? You want an injured player? You want to put an injured player on the battlefield? How long did it take us to essentially push Steve Scalise out? Less than a day. Why? Because if it goes to the House floor, not in private, behind closed doors where the public can't see it, and I don't know, Marjorie Taylor Greene stands up and says, I love Steve Scalise. He's a friend of mine. He's going through blood cancer treatment. So you expect somebody that's going through blood cancer treatment to keep the conference in order, meaning massive amounts of meetings and personal relationships to keep people together. As a leader, you got to do that. You have to continue to communicate to keep people's trust. In addition to that, go after and negotiate in an aggressive posture with Schumer, and then basically negotiate with the Chinese Communist Party's ambassador to the United States, currently squatting in the White House, a guy by the name of Joseph Robinette Cheatham. You want your injured player to fight that? And when that's presented before the country on C-SPAN, that the FBI can't censor C-SPAN, and the people hear it and see it, the people are like, what? No way we're gonna have an injured player. Dude's great and all. How about he focus on his medical treatment? And if he can crush cancer, which we pray he does, then let's consider him for a position. So when that discussion started, We first started with the whack-a-mole of Kevin McCarthy. Steve Scalise. Who's next? Jim Jordan's now in the pole position. However, is he the best person in the country to go against very powerful, very influential, and very corrupt individuals? I argue he is not the best that we have. While I would agree that he's the best that we have in the House, he's not the best U.S. citizen we have. And right now, at a time where this lawlessness is so off the rails, we have to do something very unconventional to do with the necessary autocorrect in our country. And this is what I propose. And I'll explain why, because this is an important part. I need everybody to understand this. Donald Trump, right now, today, there's no way he gets 217 votes with this Republican conference. I tell you that with certainty, practically. Standing here today, there's no way he gets 217 votes. But there is a way where we get him to 217 votes. The process is the victory here. And I'll explain that in a second. But if we do get to him to 217, why doesn't he appoint Kash Patel, who served for Devin Nunes on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, to expose all the way back to 2017, moving forward, everybody I mentioned, and then some. DOJ, FBI, the Brennans of the world, the 60 that provided cover for the Biden criminal syndicate laptop, right? And so on and so forth within the whole national security apparatus. Former CIA directors, FBI directors, former, current, etc. I can't think of a better person to be the House Sergeant at Arms to then hire those of us that just did not bend the knee to the lawlessness.
Yes.
And what about him hiring all the J6 defendants to help research to go after who we need to go after? Did I say boomerang yet today? We're just getting started. What about, wait, didn't I say that the chair of the Capitol Police Board is in a position to hire and fire the Capitol Police Chief? When you control the Capitol Police Board? If I'm not mistaken, I think so. And what about bringing in the former Capitol Police Chief, Stephen Son, who you probably saw on Tucker, basically saying, Nancy Pelosi needs to be looked at about the Fedsurrection. The Fedsurrection. The Nancy surrection. And what about the guy wearing the MAGA hat? As he was trying to protect himself, to calm things down in the crowd, he didn't really know what's going on. He evacuated the Senate chambers, was calling on Yogananda Pittman, the one that I mentioned earlier, to go ahead and evacuate the House chambers. She refused to do anything. In fact, she facilitated that unlawful entry into the Capitol to allow it to be breached so that they could politically target everybody that entered. Tarek Johnson. How about we reinstate him and promote him? And it doesn't have to be me. I get it. That looks like me on the right. I'm just throwing it in there just to kind of like spice it up. We need to have a lawyer in the position of the general counsel on the U.S. Capitol Police that will have the courage to go ahead and say, you know what? I advise the Capitol Police Chief to release all the footage publicly, full stop.
Yes.
Let the people crowdsource the truth. And you know what? We're going to put it out on C-SPAN so the FBI can't censor it over at Facebook and CommieTube and Instagarbage.
Amen.
And since we're on this, going to release, if it's me, I'm immediately, same day, releasing every single document,
Yes.
email, text message, phone call, every single artifact that exists surrounding the decision-making process by Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy, he was the minority leader, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, with their family. Alexandra Pelosi was with Nancy Pelosi that day. Her son-in-law, Michael Voss, was outside the Capitol that day. I want to see all those communications. I also want to see all their communications with Ray Epps and John Sullivan, the interbreach team leader, and their communications with DNC security, RNC security. Was there any interaction with them or with Yogananda Pittman as it applies to the pipe bomb emplacement at the RNC and the DNC? And so on and so forth. Oh, I won't bore you with all the names. You get a picture, right? Right? Several hundred.
Tomorrow.
What will we find out, you think? I know, by the way, I will say one more thing. And all of the documents that were hidden when they sent it over to the National Archives so they wouldn't be touched. You think the truth's going to come out? And what will the truth do?
Set us
Who's
free.
it going to set free? All the political hostages currently rotting in the DC gulag and other places. We're over 1,000 days of the J6 political hostage crisis.
I know.
Who's old enough to remember how many days were our Iranian hostages held in captivity in Iran? It was less than 1,000 days, to put it in perspective. That is being done by our lawless and illegitimate executive branch.
Yes.
So, how do we get into 217? I'll tell you after this slide, which will be the last one. So this is the penultimate, pre-last slide. So I suspect, for those that don't understand the importance of why it has to be Donald Trump, let's go through these. Number one, immunity.
Yep.
He gets full immunity, which means what, Jack Smith? Which means what, Fanny? What about you, Alvin, over in New York? How about you also, your buddy up there in Albany, Letitia? Boomerang. Number two, speech and debate clause. Hey, Jack Smith, you want to go ahead and silence Donald Trump? Well, the Constitution allows something called the speech and debate clause. So when he's Speaker of the House, and he has his own social network called Truth, and he has C-SPAN 1, 2, and 3, he might even want to create C-SPAN El Ocho, who speaks Spanish here. Can't censor it. Can't gag it. The truth now gets out. Let's keep going. Number 3. We talked about it. Kash Patel. How about he hire the tier 1? What are the most elite military units that you've heard of? What else? What else? Think about that. I heard somebody pronounce the word Delta, Green Beret, SEALs. You think there are enough of those that basically say, you know, I'm not going to bend the knee. I'm retiring. And I have 20, 25, 30 years of experience. It'd be nice for Kash Patel, as the former chief of staff for the former Secretary of Defense, to hire those people to do what? To go ahead and provide them maximal rules of engagement. To do what? Let's go through that. What about providing some of these lawless executive branch actors the Roger Stone and the Steve Bannon treatment? They set the precedence, right? For those that don't recall, the Steve Bannon treatment that I'm referring to is, hey, Fanny, we're going to subpoena you. Hey, Jack Smith, we're going to subpoena you. Hey, Letitia James, we're going to subpoena you. Hey, Alvin Bragg, we're going to subpoena you. Oh, we're not going to stop there. How about Chris Wray, Garland? How about John Brennan and the 51 that provided cover of the Biden criminal syndicate laptop? And so on and so forth. You want all their names? Read my Substack and read Kash Patel's book. That's the shorthand. And if they don't show up, within 3 days of us requesting them to show up to testify. That's called criminal contempt of Congress. And we're not going to file a criminal referral over to the DOJ. Why would we? That's the illegitimate and lawless executive branch. They're not going to do anything to their own. The senior law enforcement official of the House of Representatives, Kash Patel, is going to ask the newly hired J6 defendants, the newly hired members of units that you just listed, that have a little bit more decades of experience than those that are even the FBI's hostage rescue unit. So then we go ahead and get them. Make sure we compel them in a lawful manner, patriotically, peaceful for us, to go ahead and make sure that they testify. And oh, by the way, wasn't Steve Bannon swatted? Why don't we do it locally? And why don't we have influencers that are on Telegram, Rumble, Truth, Clout Hub, Frank's Speech, Right Side Broadcasting, One American News, War Room? Why don't we invite them to live stream the raid? Just like they did to Roger Stone when they called Commie News Network. I'm not doing anything different. An eye for an eye, right? And we're using the institutions lawfully, morally, and ethically to do so. Is anybody against that? Keep going down the list. This is important since you're engaged in listening. How about, in the process of being speaker, remember those 2 impeachment hoaxes? Why don't we present the evidence to the American people uncensored how those were hoaxes, actually? Because most people in this room know that it was a hoax, but most of society doesn't because they were censored into believing what the FBI coerced them into. Now this is our ability for a little bit of cleansing. And then at the end of it, why not have a nullification vote of those impeachments? Meaning they don't exist anymore, right? That's an exoneration. Let's keep going. What about those impeachment managers that participated in impeachment hoaxes? How about we expel them from Congress? If we don't have the votes, we censure them. Okay? What about a couple members in the second impeachment? Those 2 listed there. Let's go ahead and expel them as well. Now, I do forgive a little bit. Their one option to survive is they can go ahead and make a public statement apology, vote for the nullification of the vote that they voted for, and we will just expel them. We won't go further. Next, what about the J6 cover-up committee? Remember that? I call it and pronounce it the Mike Pence J6 cover-up committee, headed up by his running mate, Lizzie Cheney. Make sense now when you frame it that way? Exactly what it was. How about we go and make sure that there are consequences for them? Expose the illegal election, the Chinese infiltration of our industries, the lab incident in Wuhan. Go ahead and, the whole Fauci files nonsense, the censorship scheme, and the Fedsurrection. That goes, without saying. And then hold it to account the 3 institutions within our executive branch that went after me through 20 investigations. Is this personal? You're right, it's personal. And I'm not going to hide that because I'm honest and transparent about everything. Next, how about what was phase 4?
Children.
What was phase 4? Millstone? All right. This one angers me, but I gotta calm down. Everybody in our government that promulgated the emergency use authorized products that resulted in the murder through the big pharma products, all of them need to be held to account. All of them. And that starts with the COVID task force, all the way down to every single school board that voted to asphyxiate a child's lungs with the face tool. Those will be all defendants in Nuremberg 2.0 equivalency. Quick trial with maximal consequences, okay? And then, of course, we're going to go through an impeachment of Biden and Harris. We have several hundred articles of impeachment to go through. It's not to remove them through that process because the Senate we have a China first Senate, so that's not doable right now. But it's for the purpose of educating those states, and remember the tweet that I was banned for? It's in order to educate the legislatures of at least 3 of those states, Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, to include Mr. Robin Voss and Devin LeMahieu, the Senate president, for you collectively to understand, one, they have the power to do this, whether they want to do it or not. The evidence that the impeachment is going to create for you and the American public, uncensored on C-SPAN, will basically motivate you to descend on Madison to demand that they remove their electors from 2020, and you're not leaving Madison until it happens. And what does that do? Wisconsin and Arizona and Georgia do that. That means the guy in the White House, the Chinese agent, is no longer legitimate constitutionally, triggering a 12th Amendment contingent election in the U.S. House, where you have a Speaker Trump, and they hold a vote, one state, one vote, where the Republicans have the majority under that construct and the majority under the one person, one vote construct. Who do you think that they would vote for to replace the illegitimate one? Does it make sense now? And lastly, and not least, how do we get them to 217, which is the necessary number of votes in the House of Representatives to elect a Speaker of the House? First thing happens, it looks like the Uniparty's delaying. They're trying to not have a public vote until they can secure 217 votes. And the way they're doing it is that your Kevin McCarthy's, probably Steve Scalise's, Nancy Pelosi, and Hakeem Jeffries, notice both political parties, I call it the China First Party, they are trying to make sure that they have one of their own so that, can't go back, so that they can control the House Sergeant at Arms so that they don't move the current Capitol Police Chief, which will then, if we put our guy in there, it exposes the whole thing. Everything gets exposed, from the 2020 election to the censorship, everything. And I think I've been pretty effective at explaining that, right? So they're going to use Democrats and Republicans to keep their guy in. But the momentum is on our side. If last week Jim Jordan wasn't even part of the conversation, people are rising up and they're like, no, it's going to be Jim Jordan. But guess what? Their opportunity for our Jim Jordan is no longer. They should have accepted our offer when we presented it last week, but they did not. So now it's our time to push forward. 6 members of the House never voted for Kevin McCarthy in January. Not once. What did that do? They went from trying to keep Nancy Pelosi's rules to 15 votes later, creating the weakest Speaker of the House that represented a strength of the people. We went down to one person motion to vacate. Matt Gaetz, thank God, exercised it. And 7 of his colleagues I gotta give shout outs to Nancy Mace, who up until when she had her hearing in the oversight committee where she said, I was injured by the jab and now I'm awake. She was a rhino to me up until that point, meaning like weak politician. Wow, that changed her. She's one of the 8, called the Great 8, that voted to go ahead and move forward with the motion to vacate, to then remove McCarthy. What did that do? That weakened the uniparty CCP first politicians massively, but they're trying to retain power. They put it up to Steve Scalise. Less than 24 hours later, Jim Jordan is now in the pole position. So, those 6. How about this? Here's just a thought. Whenever they have their first vote, the CCP first folks are going to say, you know what? They're not going to give Jordan the 217 votes. And here's what we do in response. You don't vote for Jim Jordan? Eli Crane from Arizona, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, Andy Biggs from Arizona, Paul Gosar from Arizona, Victoria Sparks from Indiana, Byron Donalds from Florida, Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, so on and so forth. We run at a minimum of 150 rounds of voting. 15 rounds took 5 days in January. 150 rounds is going to take 50 days if we go every day. What does that do to the psyche of the nation? As each member of Congress stands up and explains, the last 10 months while I served in Congress on so-and-so committee, I now have seen for myself personally the lawless and illegitimate executive branch and what they've been doing to us. And specifically, their #1 existential threat, that is literally the only individual that's going to be able to take this back today instead of waiting for an election that may not occur because of what they're doing. So then that member of Congress stands up and says, I rise today to nominate President Trump to be the speaker. So imagine 5 people vote for someone that's not the majority. Like, all you need is 5 people to disagree with what the Republican majority vote getter is getting to block anyone from becoming speaker. So that rhetoric, the 3-5-minute speech that the whole country and world will see and hear because it's uncensored again, they get to do what? They explain to those that don't really follow politics reality. And then the next vote, you have the next member of Congress from their perspective on why they're nominating Trump. The third one, the fourth one. So then we exhaust the first 6. We had those 8, right? We had the terrific 20 back in January. That 21 actually with Victoria Sparks. So you have 21 rounds. And imagine every round, first round, Trump gets 5 votes. Second round, he gets 6 votes. 7 votes, 8 votes, 9 votes. And that's literally the ideal process that we need. Because he doesn't want the speakership. We must ensure he gets it. And the way we get there is that you all have to communicate to your member of Congress that this is the only path to getting our country back today. There is no waiting till the election. It is today, now. We're at a moment in our country where we can fix it literally. But it can't be done with 1 vote. We lose if Donald Trump gets 217 votes on the first ballot, we lose. That is a loss. The process of educating the whole country through those 150 votes is mandatory for the people in this country to wake up. So then we go to the first 40, which are Freedom Caucus members. That is 40 voting rounds of content that will motivate the constituents of the Rhino Lights to then feel the pressure and pain to also have to vote for Donald Trump. Then we move on to another 40 or 50 rounds. Once they see that we mean business, when I say we, I'm talking about we the people. Yes, they're going to fight us back. But guess what? In the game of chicken, when one side is malleable and the other side, us, I didn't bend a knee. Cash Patel's J6ers that he's gonna hire, did they bend a knee? The ones that he's gonna hire? No. And all of us are not gonna bend a knee. And so we're going to foist onto Congress the one person that's gonna quickly recover our country back to a sense of normalcy. He doesn't have to be in that position for the entire time. Just enough time to guarantee his reelection. And he's got C-SPAN to do daily press conferences to exonerate himself from Jack Smith, Fannie Willis, Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, you name it. Uncensored. The media will have to cover it. And actually, they don't even need to cover it because no one's going to be watching them. Why not just go to C-SPAN? Let's see it. You're irrelevant. That is how we fix this. The first vote, at least right now I'm tracking, is Tuesday. I suggest give them an opportunity to vote Jim Jordan. When they fail us on that, they will regret it. Who's in? Who's in for this? So my one ask for you is, who is your congressman? He's part of the House Freedom Caucus. Who has his number? You know what to do. Thank you. Any questions? Can I take a question or two, or is that when we're done?
I do have a question.
Ma'am.
Megan Wolf, what's your current stance on that, and what do we have the ability to take care of?
The question is, Megan Wolf, what's my stance on that? And do we have the ability to remove her from her current position? Who has Robin Moss's phone number? Someone? Those people only react to shame, pain, and when the shame and pain comes greater from their big dollar donors than you, guess what? They're not going to listen to you. And when you create the leverage of every single person in this room, just that many people, if you show up, half of you, if you show up day in and day out physically, professionally, tell Robin Moss that you're not moving until he publicly makes a statement, has a vote in the House to impeach, remove not only her, but also the Supreme Court Justice. What's the name? And then if he refuses, then you get more people to show up, and more, and more, and more, and more. 150 rounds of boxing we talked about for the House. It's all about how much you're willing to push. And I'm gonna tell you this, in a game of chicken, I personally do not lose. Doesn't mean I win, but I guarantee you I will not lose as long as I'm alive. So if you take that approach and they know you're serious because of the body of work you've done, I think I have street cred based on what I just said that they've done. Members of Congress, both political parties, are very uncomfortable when I'm in their vicinity. Because I don't care what political party you are. If I smell an inkling of corruption, transgression, I'm going to call you out on it. And if you fail to correct, I'll continue to call you out on it. And one of those individuals I do it to his face every time I see him. You're Speaker of the House. He knows where I stand. I do it professionally, but it makes him uncomfortable. Last time I saw him, he said, I deserve to not be primary, Ivan. It cost me $1 million to basically save my political career. Indirectly, he's saying, please don't do that again. It was painful. So if he doesn't do it by mid-November, what I think you guys probably want, I think we need to coalesce around his primary opponent by mid-November. At a much more aggressive level than what we did last time. I'm talking about Adam. That's the pain that they respond to. And they know, like based on what he told me, I met him at the National Conference of State Legislatures in Indianapolis. And that was literally what he explained. It was painful for him. He had to steal it by 260 ballots.
So it happened to be 49-51.
What's that?
The vote for Adam versus Voss, 49-51, just under the.
260 ballots, just over the recount. Right? I was there. I mean, I was campaigning. I felt that that was the most important race nationally in the entire country of all 7,000 legislative races in the country. Unfortunately, and this is where I apologize to you, I didn't get the endorsement that he needed to pretty much guarantee his Robin Voss's loss until literally 2 weeks into mail-in ballot. So I own it too. There's no way that Robin Voss would have won that election had President endorsed him before the start of the voting, because the district was like 70%. So that's my recommendation. Ma'am.
Did I hear, you're against the formalized religion or church?
Sorry?
I heard you were against the formalized church or religion, or,
Against the formalized church or religion. You got me confused with someone else.
well, what's your stand on what they can do to help?
Who's they?
With the church?
Oh, the church, massive. Any organized group that can communicate with each other and organize in an uncensored fashion, such as a church, needs to be using this as a platform to not only educate about moral and ethical foundational principles from the Bible, but also societal norms and foundational principles, constitutional, right? And how it's downstream from what we study, from faith. Sir.
Do you know if Mike Gill is going to be testifying as a whistleblower to Congress in the near future?
You would have to ask Mike Gill. I get that a lot, like Mike Gill, Mike Gill. I mean, Mike Gill knows a lot about New Hampshire. Well, I'll work with anybody that exposes corruption. But I can't force them to work with me. I mean, I can try to offer myself up, but if, because I have a bald head, they don't want to, well, I don't know. To me, that's not important if you have a bald head. I'm just using that as an example. Ma'am.
I love your plan for the speaker votes. How many of our assemblymen are on board with that, or even are aware of it? Other than Tom Tiffany from last night, and I don't think he heard it in the detail that we just heard it.
So, I'll tell you a little secret.
Please do.
For those listening in, and the thousands that will listen in later. This I presented to Laura Trump, Eric Trump, 2 days ago.
And their thoughts?
Yesterday, I presented it to General Flynn. I've texted numerous members of Congress. I tweet and tag and respond to the posts of numerous members of Congress. I posted on my social media accounts that in the collective probably have several 100,000 reach. I will be doing more podcasts over the next few days with podcasts that have hundreds of thousands of listeners, viewers. I'm doing events like this. I'm emailing and texting and sometimes calling, promoting this. In a few hours, I'll be back in Washington, D.C. Tomorrow morning, I'll be walking the halls of Congress as I hand this plan to members of Congress before they even vote. I will communicate it as I whisper it to their ears. The individuals that I named that are probably in the best position to do so, I'll be asking everybody that I know to do the same as much as you can. That's why I asked, do you have his phone number? I do, but it helps when 50 of us ask it, especially if you're a constituent. I'm not. Any other ideas?
No, that's great. That is wonderful. I will put pressure on where I can.
So that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to motivate others to participate. If you think that that's effective, I think it is. And then I contact my media friends. Oh, by the way, I have a list of 5,000 media contacts. And when I feel the inclination to also share with them to say, hey, I provided the plan that I'm just discussing to every member of the Republican conference. Would you care to ask them what their comment is? And when they get 50, 100 media outlets asking them what their comment is on Ivan's plan, they're probably gonna have to read the plan, right? Now it's in their brain and they're like, intriguing. Especially now that every single one of my constituents is now aware of it and is demanding me of it. And they're telling me they're gonna primary me if I don't do this plan. There's a different calculus, right? Is anything that I'm promoting or advocating violent? Am I inciting anything remotely that anybody would consider as violent? It's not even close. It's not even like a judgment call. Like, oh, let's look at the line here. But am I a threat? Yes. That's why they're trying to come after me. And guess what? The Lord will protect me. I could care less about those scum. I'm coming after them. So if you join me, we'll be very welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Lunchtime?
Tape is on your face.
Huh?
I was wondering if you could give what you did to either one of these phone numbers, if you could. This was his Facebook.
I think we need to pray for him.
Let me talk to him.
Yeah, I also just want to thank you, Ivan, so much for all that information. We will be taking a free will offering for Ivan. He's traveled around the country doing this and often does not receive any compensation for it. So anything that anybody can find, do we have a basket or something in the back?
I think that's.
Yeah, I think we'll get that. So make sure to do what you can there. And yeah, if anybody wants to come up and let's pray for Ivan.